Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to the February 9th, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Tonight, fires rage across southern Australia.
One of the world's most fire-prone regions is again facing an extreme emergency. An unknown number of homes in the Australian state of Victoria have been destroyed as dozens of bushfires bear down on communities. Smoke billows into the air as the flames tear through forest and farmland. The true extent of the damage might not be known for days. The firefighting effort is run with military precision. Boots on the ground are supported by water-bombing aircraft, yet still the fires burn. The authorities say the emergency is the worst Victoria has faced since 2009, when bushfires killed 173 people and razed more than 2,000 houses.
Across Victoria today, we've faced conditions that are the worst we've seen in 5 years. We've faced significantly hot conditions after a long period of dry weather, making the fire conditions very, very serious.
Some residents have been ordered to leave their homes, and the flames have spread into the outer suburbs of Melbourne, Australia's second biggest city. There's an emergency too over the border in South Australia. Cooler weather in the next 24 hours should help the huge firefighting effort in Victoria, although strong gusty winds continue to push the flames towards built-up areas. Australia is well used to nature's extremes, but fast-moving and unpredictable bushfires will always spread fear and panic. Phil Mercer, BBC News.
Friends, as you heard in that report, that's the worst fires they've had there in Australia in 5 years. Now, we're going next over to Switzerland, where Swiss voters have narrowly backed a referendum proposal to bring back strict quotas for immigration from European Union countries. Now, this story has a couple of twists to it. One, it's a good example, perhaps, for the United States, for some who've been holding back on putting together immigration quotas that are needed here, and borders, and a good fight against allowing just too much immigration for this country that's in tremendous financial trouble, etc., etc. The other twist to this story relates to the European Union, which means this is what Swiss is doing is going to put them at odds with the European Union, which wants to have open borders. But here the vote invalidates the Swiss-EU agreement on freedom of movement. And this is what I want you to get out of this story, friends. Eventually, when you understand who Israel is and Israel's 12 sons, the 12 tribes, 13 when you count the 2 half-tribes. When you understand where they are in today's modern world, you'll understand and put that together with an understanding of the coming United States of Europe, a coming beast power, the coming 7th head. You know, the 6th head occurred of this, the head of the beast that relates to the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar saw, that the prophet Daniel interpreted. And when you put all that together, we know that the 6th head occurred during the time of Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, back just before World War II. In the years before that, when not Hitler but Mussolini went into Ethiopia and then proclaimed that he had established the old Holy Roman Empire, and that was the one is of Revelation 17:10. One is, 5 are fallen, one is. That's how we know that that was the 6th head That's how we know the timing of this and when it occurred. And one is yet to come. And that one yet to come, that seventh head that will have 10 toes, is what we're watching to see come together. And it's pretty much, news couldn't be more interesting now, friends. We're watching prophecies which prophets of old that could not understand. It was sealed against the understanding of Daniel. Daniel would have given anything just about to know. And friends, I just noticed, let me throw a chart up on the screen for just a moment. It's good to see this anyway. I just noticed I've had our volume controls very much in the wrong place. I think I've got it in about the right place now. So, I'm going to come back on, and I hope I wasn't blasting anybody's speakers out. I hope we've got that in about the right place now. Let me just take another look and a gander at this. Oh, I see. Wait a second. I was doing the wrong control. Okay, let me see if that looks a little... That's got the needle looking a little more in a normal place. We do a live broadcast, and friends, I'm the only one in the studio running the video switcher, the audio, and having to watch the VU meters and run the film. I'm not complaining. I'm just explaining as to why. If there are problems, you can point the finger right here. It's my fault. We run a one-man show here, a one-horse operation, at least for the moment, and I was thankful today, friends, that we had some warmer weather in Alabama. I was able to get outside and take care of some things that the animals needed me to take care of, the fruit trees, which thank God he's managed to keep them alive so far during all this freezing weather. And some of my friends, some of you who have encouraged me to trust God about that, I appreciate that, because I'm doing all I can. Some people would do more, but I'm not able. And some of my friends said, just trust God. And I'm saying, you know what? That gave me confidence that with their confidence and faith, that I could put a prayer up to God and ask him to protect my stuff here and just go with that. But we're watching for that seventh head to come together with the 10 toes. And those 10 toes, those 5 nations from the east, those 5 nations from the west, could be a combination of nations in some a regional situation. But we believe they will not include Israel, any of the Israel countries. And right now, as part of the Eurozone, there are a lot of countries in the Eurozone that are Israel-like countries. Swiss, the Switzerland, the Swiss, the Norwegians, many other countries over in Europe. That a lot of you know that already. And some nights we're going to put a chart up here and go through that. But some of those have got to be thrown out of there. And this next story is just paving the way to watch for Switzerland to be thrown out. And here's the element that's likely to do it. When Swiss votes for this thing that's going to put a limit on the freedom of movement between the Swiss and the EU, that violates an agreement between the Swiss and the EU, and that could wind up with Swiss being kicked out of there. And that's just the kind of thing we're watching for. So, friends, can news be more interesting than right now? I really don't think so. Today is it. It's happening. We're hearing the worst of this. Now, the worst fires in Australia has only been in the last 5 years, but let it go a little bit more. We're hearing a lot about the worst weather in 50 years, the worst drought in 50 years, more than 50 years now, and a little bit more, and it'll start to break longer records, and could become the worst ever. This story on Swiss voting for quotas against immigration. We'll go now to Imogene Folks for her report on this.
It was one of the closest votes in years, and counting the ballots took an unexpectedly long time. But in the end, the yeses to immigration quotas just managed to outnumber the noes. The vote reflects deep divisions in Switzerland over the impact of immigration. 1 in 4 people here are foreign, and while business leaders say they need highly qualified workers from across Europe, Swiss voters are worried their country is becoming just too crowded.
Switzerland's system of direct democracy means that the people always have the final say, even though immigration quotas have been approved by only the tiniest of margins. The Swiss government will now have to tell the European Union that Switzerland doesn't want to be part of free movement of people anymore. The question is, how will Brussels react?
The signs are not good. In a first response, Brussels said it regretted the vote and would examine the implications for EU-Swiss relations as a whole. That means all Switzerland's other treaties with the EU are at risk, including its crucial access to Europe's single market, where over half of all Swiss exports are sold. It's not yet clear how severe the response from Brussels will be, but already some Swiss are wondering whether the long-term consequences of rejecting free movement will be worse than those of accepting it. Imogen Folks, BBC News, Bern.
Friends, something else to be watching, the red horse, which relates to, let's take a look at that chart for a moment. It relates to war and rumors of war, as Jesus Christ described it in plain language. And one of the things Jesus Christ encouraged us to be doing is to be praying that thy kingdom come. And some of this should give us a little more heart in our prayers, more than this thing in Syria have been going on what seems far too long. Why can't men in this modern world, with all the communications equipment we have and the ability to spy on others and to know what's going on and all this powerful explosives, to be able to, why can't they control Syria? And there's a God of this world that's stirring up all kind. There's one country after another now. Internally, its people are fighting the local governments. And that's what's happening and been happening for a long time, and it seems like much too long a time in Syria. More than 600 civilians have been evacuated from the rebel-held old quarter of the central Syrian city of Homs, according to a state media report. This was despite mortar fire and shooting, which activists say killed several people and wounded others. Paul Wood has this report.
Terrified civilians make their way out of the besieged old city of Homs. They've been trapped there for almost 2 years. They can get out now because there's a UN-brokered ceasefire. Mortar bombs start to fall. People scatter, running to hide in the shattered buildings close to the front line. Some abandoned their few possessions in the streets. This is a rebel-held area. People here say this fire can only be coming from the regime side, though the Syrian government denies it. One theory is that pro-government militias, rather than the Syrian army, are to blame. The UN brokered a ceasefire so it could get aid in as well as people out. Yesterday, mortars fell close to a Red Crescent convoy. Some trucks had to turn back. Only 2 vehicles made it in. They had just 250 food parcels for as many as 2,000 people. Aid workers found themselves trapped alongside the people they'd come to help. They took shelter for several hours as a barrage continued. One senior UN official called it a day in hell, but it was just a glimpse of what the civilians of Homs had to endure every day. This is pro-government television's version of events. A family tells the interviewer the rebels refused to let them leave. The father says rebel fighters seize any humanitarian aid for themselves.
The Syrian government and opposition are gathering in Geneva to resume their peace talks there. A ceasefire in Homs was supposed to have been a confidence-building measure as part of that process. But as so often in Syria, a ceasefire is something that exists in name only. Paul Wood, BBC News, Beirut.
Thank you, Paul Wood. Friends, let's go back to the chart just for a moment. Our next story is again going to relate to that second seal of Revelation 6, the red horse. If you look 2 columns over, we've got a number 2 and a red bar. This is to indicate what Revelation depicts as a red horse. And again, Jesus Christ described the activities, the characteristics of this red horse as war and rumors of war, world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. That's what we're ultimately looking to see happen again as we go into round 3 of world war, which began in the last century in the history of mankind. And we're looking for all of this to build up to the 5th seal, to be a time of great trouble, great tribulation, worst in the history of man, so bad that nothing before it will have ever been as bad as it's going to be, and nothing ever again after it will ever again be as bad as what is yet to come. But that red seal, that red horse, war and rumors of war, and even the 4th seal, Jesus Christ described it with a 3rd term beside loimos for disease epidemics and seismos for earthquakes and related seismic activity in the air and on the ground. He used the term terake, to mean trouble, troubled waters, both literally and figuratively, and mobs and sedition. And what we're seeing in the news with what's happening with a lot of countries having their people riot internally relates both to a potential for civil war, the red horse, and for mobs and mob rule and mob war, the pale horse, and that trouble, that kind of trouble, the word means trouble, not the mega trouble of the Great Tribulation, but just trouble. That kind of trouble is something that old varmint, that old snake, that dragon that deceives the whole world religiously, and that relates to that 1st seal, the white horse, religious deception, worldwide religious deception. He's stirring all this up. He's stirring up the rioting. That Turkey's been having rioting for a long time over one thing and another. Now, today, they're stirred up over some internet laws that the parliament has just passed there. Riot police have used tear gas and water cannons to try to disperse protesters in Istanbul. The crowds were demonstrating against plans for new legislation which would give the government even more control over use of the internet. Wendy Urquhart has this report.
Smoke from fireworks and tear gas fills the air as demonstrators and riot police battle it out on the streets of Istanbul. Water cannon are brought in to try to disperse the crowd, but the protesters are not going anywhere. They're furious about a new internet law that's been approved by Parliament. If it's ratified by the President, internet sites could be blocked within hours without a court order. It will also force internet providers to keep the browsing histories of users for up to 2 years and make it available to the authorities. The Turkish Prime Minister insists that these regulations are the same as the US and several European countries already have.
There's
no way this regulation will pave the way for keeping records of people's private lives. On the contrary, this regulation makes the internet safer and more free. We're implementing the exact internet regulations that are in effect in developed countries. The same regulations are in effect in European countries and in the United States.
But critics say the law is nothing more than a gagging order aimed at stifling discussion of a corruption scandal that broke last year, when a businessman close to the Prime Minister and 3 ministers' sons were arrested. Turkey already has very strict internet laws and thousands of websites are blocked. But as far as these demonstrators are concerned, these latest restrictions are just a step too far. Wendy Urquhart, BBC News.
Friends, and over in the UK, they're having weather problems as the rest of the world, as the United States has had a number of weather problems, and there's a number of floods, not just one, a whole number of floods over in the UK. This first story I'm going to share with you in our last few minutes tonight involved rising floodwaters causing problems for drivers in Worcester, where a number of roads have been closed because of safety fears. The River Severn is now at its highest level in the city since the summer of 2007. What's that, 7 years ago? Worst in 7 years. And across the Midlands, the Environment Agency has issued multiple flood warnings. We'll have more stories from some of the other places in a moment, but on this story, the BBC's Bob Hockenhull has been surveying the situation and described Worcester as a city under siege.
Worcester, a city under siege from the Severn once more. The main bridge has been closed, splitting the area in two and causing chaos.
You can't even get through, and I'm out now trying to find a route to get into work tomorrow.
Tomorrow would be terrible. There'd be jam-packed. You wouldn't, be all going over the other bridge.
Well, it's come like shockingly quick, but there's nothing that we can do about it, really.
The waters are due to peak overnight here. The authorities are bracing themselves for a difficult week. Due to the volume of water going under the bridge, the decision has been taken to close it as a precaution. And until engineers are satisfied it is safe, this busy route in and out of the city centre will stay shut.
We're seeing some really high levels now. Worcester and south, the levels that we're seeing, certainly the highest since 2007, and they're still rising, and unfortunately the impacts are really starting to happen now.
Yesterday, this historic pub in the nearby village of Severnstoke had put up makeshift barriers which seemed to be holding up. But in the early hours, the landlord and his family were forced to flee as the waters seeped in. It'll be closed for several weeks.
It was the speed it came at, so in the end we just grabbed a pair of trousers each, and my son and his lady and my wife and I came across then, and it was above the height of our waders then, so we just managed to get out.
The state of the surrounding fields has left the pub's neighbours fearing the worst.
We are the second house from the church down here, and at the moment it's probably about a foot from actually coming into the house.
Back in Worcester, contingency plans are being drawn up as the bridge is not likely to open until Tuesday at the earliest.
All our emergency staff are working at this moment in time, and we should be putting on bus services to get people to and from work tomorrow during the rush hour in particular.
Getting back to work is a distant prospect for some, though, who are left wondering how they'll be able to recover from the devastation that's already been caused. Bob Hockenall, BBC Midlands Today, Worcestershire.
And friends, heavy rains and strong winds in other parts of the UK will get worse before they get better. The man chairing the government's Emergency Response Committee has warned. Committee Secretary Eric Pickles said that Saturday's Cobra meeting had addressed the issues of pumping, shoring up defences and transport to enable people in the southwest of England to get back to work. Mr. Pickles also said that plans were being made to protect strategic sites around the Thames Valley, such as waterworks, electricity generators, and parts of traffic infrastructure. And rather than play you his long speaking about that, I gave you the highlights of what he had to say. I want to go next to Weymouth Beach, a story about Weymouth Beach. The Environment Agency is working to protect coastal areas in southwest England. One place thought to be particularly vulnerable to high tides and winds is Weymouth in Dorset. Chris Buckler has a report from there.
Beaches have been transformed into building zones, a break in the weather, an opportunity to prepare for what is still to come. Wind and waves have already done damage along the south and west coast. Here in Dorset, they know that the storms are forecast to return.
You can see the long lines of boulders and rocks that are being put in place to try to hold the high tide back. All of this needed to prevent flooding.
But has this work come too late? The government and the Environment Agency have both faced criticism for not being well enough prepared for the extremes of the elements.
The important part of this beach.
But in coastal towns like Weymouth, people recognise the power of the weather.
I don't think they can do much to protect the coast, really. I mean, the erosion on that part of the coast is enormous, and most of it's been of recent years.
I don't know what the answer is, really, but they've got to throw a lot of money at it to stop it.
Even as the sun shines, the shadow of future storms hangs over many communities. and the pressure is on for people to be prepared. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Weymouth.
And friends, while they try to protect themselves there with boulders, the Dutch are trying to protect themselves by shifting sands to protect the Dutch coast from flooding.
How do you protect a storm-battered coastline? Well, one option is to do this. While Britain's coasts are pounded into submission, in Holland they're moving mountains to stay safe. They've shifted the entire beach 100 metres out to sea. They've created this massive new levee and now cover the whole thing with 2.5 million cubic metres of sand. And all designed to withstand a storm surge which may come just once in every 10,000 years. It is serious business. 1953's massive North Sea tidal surge inundated the country.
The same gales that laid waste so much of Britain have taken an even greater toll of property and life in Holland.
1,800 lives were lost, and they vowed never again. The challenge is huge. Here, entire communities lie beneath the surrounding rivers and canals. And so Ard is shocked by our pictures of the floods on the Somerset levels, when he and his cows are comfortable and dry.
I don't feel the risk. When you look around in this area, everywhere the dikes are made stronger to hold the water there.
Maybe there's a lesson for Somerset from what you're doing here.
Yeah, I can't believe people can let the situation go for so long, so bad.
The Dutch are fixing flooding with technology and hard graft. Here, re-establishing meanders in the river, recutting the course as it was decades ago to help slow the flow.
First of all, my sympathy is with the people that are facing these troubles now and again, obviously. But yes, indeed, I do feel a sense of pride that in the Netherlands since 1953 we haven't had a major disaster, a catastrophe, neither from the sea nor from the rivers.
The Dutch experience shows the UK that much can be done to effectively control flood risk. The question for Britain is whether the undoubted benefits would justify the huge costs. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Catbike.
Friends, if they get some winds from the north, it's really going to spell trouble. Gary Englandton, 59 years old, a New Quay fisherman, described the impact of the past 6 weeks of hostile weather on the local fishing community.
Gary Edmonton, fishing vessel Shannon, working out of Newquay. We now have the boat on the quay, hoping that the wind doesn't turn to the north. Luckily for us, we've had the wind in the south most of the winter. And on the spring tide, if the wind did go to the north, we would even have problems with the boat on the quay. But as you can see, the sea, we have ground sea here, very bad ground sea. But if we did have wind to the north, we would be in serious trouble, even on the harbour.
And friends, maybe I have time to just do one more here to show you that 14 severe flood warnings have been issued along the River Thames in Berkshire and Surrey in the UK, and amid concern that people and property are at risk.
This has become a battle to defend both people and property. The Army and Navy have united on the banks along the Thames to protect the land from water. There are now 16 severe flood warnings in place across England.
Those severe warnings are really highlighting the risk to life. We need people and communities to respond to those significant warnings and take action now.
Ahead of its usual busy Monday morning, Network Rail had this announcement.
Got a new concern tonight, which is the Thames Valley, Oxford down to Didcot and Reading and routes into Paddington. The rising waters in the Thames are meaning that the railway there is flooded, and we will be running a very limited service now between Oxford and Didcot tomorrow.
Friends, do you get the idea? There's a lot of things happening around the world, and God can intervene on the weather, but he's basically pulling hands off now to let things fall into place more and more quickly. Thanks for watching. It's a good idea to keep on top of this. And those of you who are here with me tonight, I appreciate you tuning in and telling your friends about it too if you're happy with what we're providing for you here. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again Monday night with the current day's news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, your host Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth saying so long.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.